Right, Bristol Rovers this weekend. I'm very excited. Although when I saw the news that Matt Taylor had been sacked, you get that sort of feeling in your stomach. New manager bounce potentially. But I've enlisted the help of Dan Hargraves, a Bristol Rovers reporter for Bristol Live, to unpack what is those classic weeks, Dan, where as a fellow journalist, it can be very quiet. A manager gets sacked. It's bedlam. How are things for you?
Yeah, but you've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, I mean, I had to get out of the house this morning because it's been 2 days of basically just glued to a screen. Yeah, look, we had a managerial departure kind of this time last year, a little bit earlier in the year, and that lasted 5 weeks, that process. So I'm hoping that this time it's not as long. Um, but yeah, look, it is bedlam. I think that's the perfect word for it. It's hilarious how suddenly once a club at whatever level kind of sacks a manager, suddenly they're subject to national attention. And I guess everyone wants to know why it didn't work out for that person. Yeah, look, I mean, Matt Taylor was a great guy to deal with. I think everyone's tributes have kind of been along the lines of great guy, but no one's necessarily said great manager. And because unfortunately it just hasn't worked out for him in terms of getting results and getting a competitive football team climbing up the League One table. Obviously, Rovers are now in a very real precarious position. Some foreshadowed it or foresaw it, sorry, at the start of the season. I thought they'd be all right. I thought they would be able to kind of mix it with mid-table throughout the campaign and potentially look to climb up. I mean, the pre-season target was 8th to 12th, and obviously right now they're nowhere near that.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say it's been a sort of whirlwind few years. I mean, that's maybe underselling it, but Rovers have been in the headlines for various reasons. When it was Joey Barton in charge, and then Andy Mangan had his big to do with the FA on that thing, and then he was going to go to Real Madrid at one point, and then couldn't because of Brexit. Matt Taylor gets sacked now. Bristol Rovers ended up beating Wrexham, or Wrexham didn't end up going for it, but Jamie Lindsay, who Wrexham were pursuing relentlessly, ended up at Bristol Rovers. I guess we still focus on the management side of things. What's sort of gone wrong since you went up to League One? Obviously, you managed to get up, and then it seems to have maybe plateaued and now on what seems to be the decline from the outside.
Yeah, I think I mean, Rovers have been massively inconsistent regardless of players or management for the 2.5 seasons they've been back in League One. They had a few good results at the start of their first season back. I mean, they had Aaron Collins on absolute fire, and he went on to win League One Player of the Season that year. I mean, he kind of thawed out a little bit in the second half of that season before ending up at Bolton last January. But yeah, I think it's a consistency issue. I mean, how you put or where you put your finger on why that is the $1 million question, right? Because by now you would have liked to thought someone's figured it out. I mean, it's been the constant theme. So many different players have played for Rovers in League One in the last 2.5 seasons. I mean, 16 players came in over the summer. And I think this season was always going to be a transition one. It's always going to be a transitional period for the club. But I think they've just had too many transitional periods. I mean, the amount of transfer windows where they've had to have just major squad overhauls, it's just not sustainable. I think I still think this group of players can do something this season. Obviously, reaching 8th to 12th, I think that's probably beyond them now. Because the reality is they've got to make sure that they don't end up dropping down further down the table.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm looking at the bookies odds, and there are names like Aitor Karanka. I saw your story saying Stephen Schumacher's probably a no go. That doesn't seem a goer. In your mind, and maybe you cover them day in day out. Is it an attractive job? Do you think? Because some of these jobs, like we've seen Burton recently, and some of these jobs are quite hard sells to managers of a certain caliber.
I think it is. I mean, look, with no disrespect to Northampton and Burton, I think they're very realistic in the sense that once Rovers had sacked Matt, it was the most attractive League One job by some stretch. The ownership have proven that they've at least got enough money to invest bring 16 new players in on decent enough wages for a mid-table League One side, but it's a case of who wants to come in and deal with a relegation scrap, because obviously something's desperately gone wrong. You can point fingers at the manager, but it's never just as simple as, oh, the manager was just bad at his job. There's other factors. As I said, I still think there's possibility that this group can go on and have a decent season. And when it comes to Rovers as a club, there's huge plans for a pretty short-term future. Massive plans to expand the training ground and add to the stadium, add capacity to the stadium, redevelop the memorial. But all these big plans of improving infrastructure, trying to get into the championship within the next 3 to 5 years. The focus right now has to be making sure this team is in League One next season. It's all well and good selling this big picture, but at the end of the day, what you do around the football club, whatever happens on the pitch dictates what happens around the football club. So yeah, they just cannot afford to drop into League Two with some of the money that's been spent. So yeah, I think it's an attractive job for someone potentially cutting their teeth. I think you'll look at it as, it's a great fan base. It's a great city. Sleeping Giants probably a little bit hyperbolic, but it is a big club. It is a big club for the level that really shouldn't have been in the third and fourth tiers for as long as they have been. I think it's over 30 years now since Rovers were in the second division. They deserve to have had at least one season up there since then.
On the pitch, then, if we look at a positive and a negative, if I start off with you're saying that the expectation was 8th to 12th. They're not around that at the minute. They look more in a relegation battle. What's going wrong for Rovers to not be picking up the points? Because to lose 2-0 at Birmingham, there's no disgrace there. We lost 3-1 there. Many teams are going to lose at St Andrews. But there are other games where I know Rovers fans online were particularly disappointed with the nature of the performance. Where's it not clicking? Where's it going wrong?
Goals. They just simply cannot score goals. They've had some really good defensive performances this season. In fairness to them, I think. Look, they were struggling when Chris Martin couldn't play at times last season. He scored 16 goals. Without him, I think they probably would have gone down, which is a big statement. But I think if you look at the numbers, it's probably right. He single-handedly won them in points with his goals, while they were incredibly leaky at the back. So Matt Taylor, in fairness to him, said that was the first priority, and he had tightened it up. I mean, six clean sheets in 19 games. It's kind of near a 1 in 3 ratio. It's not terrible. It could have been worse. Josh Griffiths, is the goalkeeper we've got on loan from West Brom, has been best player easily, and that tells the story. This team just aren't scoring goals at the moment. But not only that, it's not a case of they're being wasteful with chances. They're just not creating. They're not creating. I think it's 2 or 3 shots on target in the last handful of matches. It's getting to a point now where their ball use is just nowhere near the standard. And it's a strange one because there are good players in there. I was quite excited by the signing of Isaac Hutchinson. Had really good numbers in League Two for Walsall last season. Obviously would have played against Wrexham, I guess. Shaq Ford was really exciting for Leyton Orient on loan from Watford last season, and we were really pleased that we were able to get him on a permanent. I think there's way more to come from the likes of Real Satiriou and Promise Omocheri as well. So there's players there, and what will be fascinating to see on Saturday is whether a managerial departure is kind of, I hate using this terminology because it suggests that the manager was doing a particularly bad job, but release the shackles. It'd be fascinating to see if the shackles are released. I know for a fact that interim boss Dave Horseman is not going to be pleased, not at all, with kind of the standards of this season. And then Lee Casmole is someone we don't know about yet, but as a player, we all know the Sunderland captain he was. I'm sure he wouldn't be accepting some of the stuff that's been going on recently, but they just can't score goals, and that has to improve.
Yeah, the mentality thing from, anyone who doesn't know, listens to this, that doesn't know Lee Cattermole, have a look. Very, very hard-nosed captain, as Dan knows, at Sunderland, drove incredibly high standards, which I'm sure he will rub off on Bristol Rovers. I guess if you're looking for a positive, and Wrexham have not been perfect away from home, improved of late, where are the kind of, you mentioned Shaq Ford. I know there's a lot of pressure really on, is it O'Donker up front that's got to, really got to get the goals. But where could Rovers, if we catch them on a good day, where could they hurt Wrexham, do you think? What's the best chance of that?
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I mean, like I said, I think there's talent there. They've proved it. I think it's their best performances have been when they've started strongly. They've pressed well. They've basically suffocated their opponents. In fairness to them, the results at the Mem haven't been bad this season. I think the kind of overriding feel at the moment is gloomy because they were so poor in their last home game against Blackpool 3 weeks ago. But generally, they haven't been that bad at home. They've been able to compete with the vast majority of teams that have come down, or be better, really. So I think if they start well, kind of press, almost suffocate Wrexham, if you like. Getting the first goal is huge. It's so cliche, but at this level in particular, the first goal is always massive. And I think that's what the fans will need. I think that, this team really needs to start well on Saturday. Maybe get a few chances away, a few shots away. If that can lead to a goal, then great because it'll get the fans on side. And once the fans are on side, it's a really, really tough place for any team.
Well, look, we're excited to come. It's been a few years since we've been to the Memorial. It's the early kickoff. Didn't thanks Sky didn't do us a massive favour there, but maybe they have because we get a Friday night out in Bristol.
Yeah, absolutely.
What can we expect if you've never been before to the Memorial? A manager has just gone, and whether people were tailor in or tailor out, whatever the case, it's a new chapter, and we don't know. We're chatting on Wednesday morning. There might be a new man in tow or in the stands or whatever the case may be. What atmosphere are you expecting there on Saturday?
I'm expecting a good one. I'm expecting one that's been better than it has been this season. In all honesty, you know, I've been in this job for a year and a half, and I don't think I've seen the Memorial Stadium that Gasheads tell me about and that other people tell me about. I just don't think it's been at the level that we've seen in the past, and that's mainly because of what's kind of been on display in terms of the football. So that's not a dig at fans whatsoever. It's because there's been not much to cheer about. But this fan base love their football club. They're brilliant, and I think a lot of them will be pleased with the news that Matt Taylor's left. It just wasn't working, and hopefully, I mean, we talked about lifting shackles off the players. Hopefully, it lifts shackles off the fans potentially. I think they'll be looking to get behind their team. I think they'll be particularly noisy, but how long that lasts completely depends on how well Rovers start. Obviously, if Wrexham silence the crowd, if you like, then it could get pretty cagey, pretty toxic quickly. But vice versa, if Rovers start well, then it could be a really, really difficult place and atmosphere to for Wrexham to play their best stuff in.
Look, lastly, then it's a very tough league, and that feels a bit like an understatement. You look at like Charlton, who are 14th or 15th or whatever they are. Rovers down in 20th. A lot can change. January's around the corner. We're hoping for big things. I'm sure Rovers will be looking to do a bit of wheeling and dealing and maybe get some more goals in the team and get a new manager. What do you expect now rather than hopeful? What do you think the season has left for Rovers? Do you think they will still be in this relegation dogfight, or do you think they can figure it out if they make the appointment and they get that right, that there's actually, like you sort of said, there's a lot of talent in this group that's gone untapped so far?
Yeah, I mean, look, it completely depends on the appointment. So I don't know it about putting out a straight prediction on record, but I
Huh.
think
But
yeah,
you were saying about an appointment that cut in their teeth. Do you not feel that would be a gamble in and of itself in such a?
I do. I do. I massively do. I mean, if I'm there picking the new manager, I'm going for someone experienced. But I'm obviously not making that decision. Maybe the
Yeah.
ownership will hear this. Yeah, look, I think it's not going to be a top half finish for Bristol Rovers. I'm pretty confident about that. But I still think they can pull themselves out of it with. I mean, we call it a new manager bounce, right? I think every club gets that. And I just think that the appointment has to come in quickly, because this is a great time if you are going to have that bounce, because you've got loads of fixtures coming up in quick succession. At the same time, if you're kind of waiting, you're uncertain, you know, you're playing a lot of games and you can miss out on a lot of points, and it could get worse. I think it will get worse before it gets better, but I would be extremely surprised if this is a League Two football club next year. I do think they will have enough to stay up, whether that's by the skin of their teeth or a bit more comfortably. We'll have to see. But
Well,
touchwood,
well,
I think they'll be staying up.
well. Look, all we want is one more week of misery, and then you can go and then you win every game if you
Yeah,
want.
one
Yeah,
hundred
so yeah, we're
percent.
more than happy. So look, if you're listening and you're interested in what's going on at Bristol Rovers, I know quite a few people are always interested in other League One teams, what's going on. Dan's like socials are in the description. You follow those, and we can get all the updates on the having covered clubs where managers get sacked, bedlam as I called it. So yeah, say hello if you see me at the Memorial Stadium, and follow Dan's work for all the updates on Bristol Rovers.
The Wrexham AFC podcast with Nathan Salt and Rich Faye.